followed by the last presentation on research access, where you may have to get physical access towards the organization or individual consent from the individual person for your research. And it's vital that the access related issues is also related to the ethics in the process of your research. Yeah, so this presentation we're talking about research ethics, particularly in relation to primary research. As we shown you earlier, so research access and ethics are kind of tied into each other. Yeah, so the process of negotiating the access to an organization or with a particular individual is part of the ethics consideration, because you can't force people to do a research, or you can't just do a research with an organization without acknowledging or get their permission, isn't it? And again, as the other diagram shows, ethics issues particularly important for primary research, and which may also relate to secondary research, but mostly important to primary research, where researcher or students would have to apply for ethics approval from the university's ethics committee. So again, let's start with the concept of ethics. So ethics refers to the standards of behavior that guide you as a researcher to conduct your research in relation to the rights of those who become the subject or participants of your research, yeah, or affected by your research. So maybe that indicate, so the standard of behavior, yeah, you have to act ethically, morally, okay, in the process of your research. And then towards those people who might directly get involved in research, or could be those people who might be affected by your research. That could be referring to the individuals and the organizations the individuals associated with, if your research topic is on organization-related issues. Okay. So secondly, ethics lies in different stages of research. And as we mentioned, from the very beginning, you have to consider the access issue, the permission, and then the consent you need to get from the individuals. Yeah, and obviously in the whole process, as we mentioned in the last presentation as well, the confidentiality, whether you need to disclose the organization's name, and the privacy and anonymity, whether the individuals need to be disclosed or not. Yeah, so all these kind of issues need to be considered. So in Saunders' core textbook, and then there's a diagram has been illustrated to you for your better understanding in terms of the different stages involved, where ethics related issues involved. So for example, it stated actually from the very beginning, when you start formulating and clarifying your research topic, you have to think about whether your research, for example, is primary, secondary, and how would you conduct the research, and whether there's any risks involved. And then from there, you probably would have already considered the ethics and access related issues. Yeah. So for example, if your research topic is on organizations in case study of whatever company or university, for example, that clearly indicates, there's impact on the company or university that you're investigating. Yeah. So where it may require ethics or access from the particular company or university. Okay, and then designing your research and gaining access, as we mentioned last week and this week as well. In the process of designing your research, how would you plan the way how you would conduct the research, yeah, and where you would grant the access, to negotiate the access from the gatekeepers or from the particular individuals. Okay, it's vital. It is part of your plan. You have to think about before you come to the point, say, oh, I'm going to get the data, go to XY organization, and they say, oh my God, I don't know anybody. How do I have access, and what are the things I need to be aware of? And obviously ethics is something you must highlight or mention in your communication to negotiate access from a particular organization or group of people or company. Okay, and then in the process of collecting your data, so after having gained access, and now you're able to possibly, go into the organization or speak to the employee of the organization to collect your data. So in this whole process, you have to think about your objectivity as a researcher, and then give the right for the participant to withdraw from your research, and then confidentiality, anonymity of the participants, and then any harm to be avoided, and right to quality research, and then all these kind of elements or factors need to be considered in the whole process. You need to make your participant aware of how they will be involved in your research and how they will be protected from your research as well. Okay, and then to the fourth stage is processing and storing your data. So again, after collecting the data, probably you say, oh yeah, I've considered everything. I anonymized the participants. I've already, anonymize the organization as well. I give them right to withdraw and all sorts of things I've considered. But again, in the process of storing your data, you have to make sure the data you collected are stored in a place that are secure and won't be accessed by other people. Okay, and also later, the last stage in the process of analyzing the data or reporting your findings, you don't, oh my God, I've included the for example, the transcription or transcript of the interview, and then you left the name or the organization's name or particular name that the interviewer has referred to. Yeah, you may say, oh, anonymize this particular participant, but you may not have anonymized a particular person these participants has referred. The participant may have mentioned something like, I hate my line manager, ho and ho, and then you put this name there, and which might not be the whole anonymity and the ethics is about. Okay, so therefore it's vital in the whole research process and the 5 stages you consider where the ethics lies in, yeah, and how you need to not only protect yourself but also to ensure the security and the safety of the participants, for example, and all the ensure to them all the ethical considerations has been applied in the whole process, so they can openly and disclose their feelings, the in-depth insight to you, which contribute to your research. Okay. So therefore, as a summary, so ethical principles for your research is the integrity, objectivity of the researcher, and you need to be honest to whoever took part in your research, the organization, and then the researcher and the participant, and the objectivity. You try not to intervene too much and then mislead them or kind of, prompt them with the answers that you would like to gain. And respect others and respect them, no matter their race, their nationality, whatever background they are coming from, or whatever particular aspect they have mentioned, which might not be something you normally come across with, but respect them. Okay, and avoidance of harm. So harm not necessarily means I'm not hating or beating the person or whatever. It's not only physical harm, but also consider the emotional or mental harm towards particular individuals or groups. So particular topics might be quite sensitive to that particular group, and something you have to consider. Okay, privacy of those who are taking part, and as we said, and anonymity as well. Voluntary nature, you need to let your participant know they have the right to withdraw at any point. So they can't take part in your research, but later on if they change their mind and they can withdraw, and then you don't need to, or you can't include the data they provided to you. Okay, and obviously informed consent, especially for interviews or for any kind of primary research actually. But I think for questionnaires or online surveys, sometimes the informed consent can be in the first introduction page. You see, if you proceed to this questionnaire, by proceeding to the questionnaire, you're giving us the consent, so which is where has indicated the consent. But sometimes if you do individual interviews, you may still have to have the consent form, separate form, to be completed, because it's kind of less people involved, and it's easier to get it from the people individually by signing it and date it. Okay, confidentiality, and as we mentioned, confidential of the individual, of the organization, and if anything has been mentioned in the research. Anonymity, and then don't disclose the names of the people who took part in your research or who has been mentioned in your research as well. Responsibility in the analysis of the data and reporting it. As we mentioned, ethics does not only lie in the process where you are collecting the data, you're speaking to the people, but also where you're analyzing and reporting it. You have to ensure the standard of behavior, in terms of the ethics, okay? And the compliance in the management of data. So after you have conducted the data or your research, how would you manage the data? All right, so would you discard them or would you keep them for a short period of time? And then, so what would you do with them afterwards? You know, where do you store them and as regarded as secure and won't be, you know, shared by others? All these need to be considered in the whole process, yeah? And then finally, the safety of you as a researcher. And obviously, as we mentioned, under COVID-19, so there's no face-to-face primary research. You can't, you know, meet people, you know, in person nowadays, but still online, you know, whether there's any, we have seen the abuse by technology, you know, verbally all sorts. And if there were face-to-face contact, I make sure, you know, your own safety. You don't, you know, meet somebody mid of the night almost, you know, in the participant private address, which might not be secure in a way, you know. So as well as you try to protect, you know, follow the ethical guidelines for the participants, in the meantime, as a researcher, you have to consider yourself, okay, the safety of yourself. So the university has very clear guidance and on primary research and ethics related issues. So where there's a particular ethics application for studies involving the use of human participants, and obviously this has included all sorts of circumstances where research involves the use of human participants, you know, in relation to staff and supervisor and students as well. So as we said, ethics consideration is vital in the process of your research design and in the whole process of your research project. So when it comes to the point of your applying for ethics, it is mainly for your final mid-year research project and then your final dissertation. So research ethics application is not needed for your research proposal and for the purpose of this module. But the purpose we discuss it is for you to understand the importance of it and the process of it, okay? So if in your final research project, you know your research is primary research and would involve the use of human participants, not necessarily, you know, meeting face-to-face, which is not allowed nowadays under COVID-19. But even if you conduct your research using internet-mediated access, like in online surveys or Skype or Zoom calls, you would still need to complete the ethics application, okay? So the university's ethics application website is available on StudyNet and the link is over there. So on this, following this link will take you to the UH ethics approval, and it has a lot of information about what you need to do before you make application and how to make applications. Yeah, and there will be lots of forms which is related, and we will talk about in the next slide. So when it comes to your final research project, and there are quite a few ethics application forms you may have to complete. So the most important and the first one could be the EC1A, either for individual research project or for group, especially for undergrad when they do a group, you know, research project. But for your final major research project or be individual research project, you must complete EC1A. Okay, and it is a must complete. And you may also need to complete EC3 consent form. And as we mentioned, you know, you need to, if your research involves human participants, you must get the consent from the individual, you know, for the cognitive access. Okay, and there's EC4 called consent form as well, but for the research involves minors or others who are not able to give you the consent themselves, so therefore you have to complete EC4. But for your final research project, and you are not advised to conduct any research with people who cannot give you consent themselves, for example, you know, participants under 18 years old, please do not do research with any participant under 18 because it's rather too complicated to conduct their guardian or contact their guardian or parents. Okay. And you may also have to complete EC5 risk assessment, which is mostly probably appropriate for the traditional access face-to-face research, and which might not be that relevant for, you know, internet-mediated research nowadays. But EC6 could be very important for you because this is the form participant information sheet that you need to give out to your participants, and then you know, tell them what your research is about, who you are, how to contact you for other issues, and how they will be protected, what their involvement with that research, and you know how the, you know, as we said, the privacy, anonymity, the confidentiality will be retained. So all these part of information could be necessary for you, and the form would be important for you to use. But if you do online surveys or online or questionnaires, you may not necessarily have this as a separate form, but embed it as part of your introduction to the participants, through the online form. Yeah. And there's EC22, which is modification or extension form if you need to make any changes to your ethics approval. It's kind of happens after your approval is granted. Yeah, and EC7 is also if your ethics application has been approved on particular conditions. For example, you have to meet your conditions later on, and then you have to complete this form. All right, but the most important is the first form you must complete. And again, as we said, it's not applying to you for this module and for your research proposal, but it's vital for you for your final research project, your dissertation, at the end of your studies. So there will be training provided in terms of how to complete the form and then explain to you to the whole process. But at this stage, just give you a very brief idea of the process, and it can be very lengthy. So make sure if you know your research involves human participants and is a primary research, please do submit your ethics application, ahead of schedule. Don't leave to the last minute, yeah, because it can take quite a few weeks or months to get back to you. So first, you complete your ethics application form and make sure all the information is completed and all the scenarios has been considered. And then your supervisor will check it and make sure that, the thoroughness of your application form. And it is not you submitting the ethics application, it's your supervisor submitted to the ethics committee. So just to ensure your supervisor is happy with whatever you put in the ethics application form and signed it to be sent away. And then an ethics clerk performs admin check. For example, if you said you included ABC as an additional document and you did do that, okay? If not, they will get back to you and ask for it. And then they will triage the application depending on the level of risks, whether low risk, high risk, for people from, for example, health and psychology, they may involve more complicated procedures. And then will be sent to the relevant clerks, an ethics reviewer for review. And after the ethics reviewer reviewed your application form, and they will make recommendations. Maybe, it is something you have to clarify, or whether it's perfectly written and then give you ground. But before they send it to you, they will send it to the chairman for final approval. So after chairman looked into the reviewer's recommendation, agrees to it, and then maybe approval or refer, or, for further information or clarification, or just reject. So obviously, very rarely people reject, but it's likely you approved or could be referred for further information. And then, if it's approved, you just, go ahead with your research. And if it's referred, you have to clarify an amendment and then go through the whole process again. Okay, so please do prepare your ethics application form and submit it ahead of schedule. And as we mentioned, if your research is primary research, and you must gain the ethics approval first before you go out to collect your data. All right, so please do prepare your ethics application, discuss it with your supervisor before you conduct it, go out to collect the data for primary research. I hope this presentation gives you an idea of the importance for ethics and what you need to consider for your, if you do primary research, and then, the process you have to go through, the complication of it, so you can prepare ahead. Okay. And again, I can't, emphasize enough the importance of you as an independent researcher. Okay, engage with the reading and then listen to my presentation, or look at the slides and prepare for the case studies, which can kind of enhance your understanding of the relevant topic of this week. And then most importantly, start working, thinking or relating to your own research. Think about, oh my God, my research is going to be primary, so what ethics I need to do. Go to the university's website indicated in the slides and have a look at all the forms, and you may find there's so much information or so many areas you have to consider if you do primary research. Okay. And again, get the support whenever you need it. And it's not the end of the world. You will be allocated supervisor by the time you do your research. But from now, as part of your proposal, your plan, start thinking ahead. Okay. So all the best.